it's not left versus right, but it's top versus bottom. It's corporate moneyed interests versus you, everyday person, trying to afford your life. And your life is more expensive and harder because of elite insiders, people in power, and companies that are power hungry, money hungry, who don't have your interests at heart.
Hey, everyone. From KQED in San Francisco, this is Political Breakdown. I'm Marisa Lagos.
And I'm Scott Shafer. Today on The Breakdown, it's been compared to Lucy and the football and Peanuts, Captain Ahab and his white whale from Moby Dick, or maybe the Texas of California. It's a Central Valley congressional district that consistently eludes Democrats, despite the fact that there are far more registered Democrats than Republicans there.
We're talking about Congressional District 22, which runs east of I-5, starting up near Fresno and ending down in Bakersfield. It includes the city of Delano, made famous during the United Farm Workers grape strike in 1965. Today, we're going to take a trip to this district, which has been held for most of the past 13 years by Republican David Valadao. Here with us, KQED politics correspondent Guy Marzorati and Maya C. Miller. She's a politics reporter for CalMatters. This is her maiden voyage here on Political Breakdown. Welcome, you two.
Hey.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
What does the C stand for?
Oh, it's my Chinese name.
Oh.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
Chu Chai.
Cool.
Mushed together.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right, we got that out of the way.
Yeah. All right, well, I want to be clear. We're not actually going to the Central Valley
I was
District.
going to say, it looks awfully familiar.
But
Maybe- I thought maybe it stands for Central Valley, but
Maybe it could.
She spent a lot of time there this cycle, and all of us have been there in the past. It's a little different than past cycles because of Prop 50, but start by telling us what, Maya, this district looks like right now. It's, as I said, in the Central Valley, and it's heavily Latino, like almost 70%.
For sure. So Prop 50 made this district a little bit more democratic. It pulled in a bit of northwest Fresno and it sort of follows Highway 99 down to Bakersfield. Bakersfield's kind of the main population center of the district. I think you get parts of Kern County, Kings County, Tulare, and now with Prop 50, part of Fresno. So it's really, really ag heavy, oil heavy down in the Bakersfield, Kern area.
So, as we said at the top, Democrats have always looked at this district as winnable, flippable. They did flip it in 2018, but, David Valadao has proved to be a really tough candidate to defeat. Why is that? Why is that such a hard district for Democrats?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. So Democrats in the Valley, in California at least, are known as Valley-crats. They are not your typical Bay Area Democrat, LA Democrat. They are maybe more conservative, less tuned into the sort of day-to-day machinations of politics, and therefore, more focused on kind of the like tangible everyday life problems and not really what's going on in Sacramento or in D.C. So I think that means less loyalty to a party, any specific party, and the Central Valley is also known to have pretty low voter turnout compared to the rest of the state. So I think that for Democrats, it's been, challenging to get the, paper advantage that they have with voter registration to translate to actual votes, especially when you have a candidate like Valadao who is personable and people generally kind of like him, as far as I can tell.
A lot of people think he's Latino, too, right?
Yeah,
he's actually
he's
Portuguese.
He's Portuguese. He's never talked to me, by the way, but people who do talk to him seem to like him.
I don't think he's talked to us since we started the show either. So
Correct.
I will say
He did talk to us in D.C., but I think
that
it
was
was
like
before
10 or
political
15 years.
breakdown.
I think that was before Trump. I mean, Guy, we've all gone down there over the years. Tell us a little bit more about Valadao. Like, he is a pretty moderate Republican.
Yeah, and a political survivor. I mean, he voted for one of the impeachments of President Trump and has lived to tell the tale.
I think the only one left.
Yeah,
He's the only one.
Other Republicans have all been either on their own volition or been voted out. And I think this district, in large part, look, I think you can say realistically Democrats' path back to controlling the House runs through Bakersfield, just because this is the only, you look at the Cook Political Report, this is the only toss-up race we have left in California.
Right.
Prop 50 moved the lines to favor Democrats. This is a real jump ball election. So there's huge stakes in this district for 2026. There's also, I think, huge stakes in this district more broadly if you look at Democrats' vision for the party in the future. This is the epitome of a district that moved, a working class Latino district that moved towards Trump in 2024. And so you look at the voters here, these are the kind of voters that Democrats lost in 2024 and will need, maybe not in 2026, but certainly in the future if they really want to retake power in Washington.
And Maya, Rudy Salas, who's from that part, also like Jasmeet Bains, kind of a moderate Democrat, voted with oil sometimes, lost twice to David Valadao. I'm just wondering, like, the Latino voters in this district, and there's a lot of them, are they different politically from the Latinos, say, in the Bay Area or L.A.?
Again, I think that it really comes down to the, who's focused on everyday problems. And, like, people that I've talked to down there, the prevailing message is, we're too busy to care about what's happening in Sacramento or in D.C. We got to live our own lives. We got to make money. We got to pay the bills. So I think that really the Latino voter in the Central Valley is far more concerned with how to get food on the table, how to take care of a family in an era when prices are surging, and
probably how to pay for health care, because this is a district with the highest rate of Medi-Cal,
highest poverty rate, too, yeah.
Medicaid program in the United States, nearly
almost
two-thirds of the district. Yeah. So talk about that, because Valadao, as we said, he is a more moderate Republican. He voted for Trump impeachment. He did vote after this Medi-Cal vote to extend the Obamacare subsidies. But this Medi-Cal vote, I think Democrats are at least hoping could really haunt him. What have you heard on the ground? Is that something that voters care about?
Yeah, I think that, and to note, he did lose that election in 2018. That's the one election that he has lost after he voted for the Affordable Care Act to repeal that. So
this is like a replay, potentially,
of 2018. The healthcare is the sort of big prevailing issue that Democrats are trying to run on. They want to kind of put this as an albatross, this vote for H.R. 1 around Valadao's neck, and hoping that this will be their ticket to getting him out of the seat finally. I'd say that when I just talk to people on the street in district, Medi-Cal doesn't come up.
Oh, interesting.
Which is really interesting, because Democrats are staking their hopes on this candidate, Dr. Jasmeet Bains, who has this background as being a doctor who serves Medi-Cal patients.
Well, and I think also the price of gas, to your point, Maya, this, bread and butter issues. This is a part of California, Guy, where people drive a lot. They're driving to work. They're driving, it's a rural area in much of it. So it would make sense if they're going to really be feeling the higher cost of gasoline.
Yeah, long commutes. And also it's a place that has historically was an oil producing part of California. And when you're talking about debates that still divide Democrats about whether to drill for more oil, the place where they're talking about is largely Kern County. Like Newsom, the governor had there was this big debate last year over whether to allow more drilling. That was really located in Kern County. But the Medicaid piece is fascinating about when is that going to set in
because they haven't happened yet.
Or is it? Yeah. And so is that reinforced for voters only when the cuts actually take place? Or is it something that through the relentless advertising that you're likely to see this fall in this district, it becomes kind of driven in voters' mind? Oh, Valadao took this vote to cut Medicaid, because there is a huge nexus. Like if you look at the districts that moved towards Trump the most in California, there's a huge overlap with districts that rely heavily on Medi-Cal. This is the most, this district, the 22nd, largest shift towards Trump, largest percentage of residents on Medi-Cal. And so Democrats are totally, to Maya's point, hanging their hat on, if we can sell this idea that the big, beautiful bill is bad for residents, we have to be able to sell it here.
Right. And they're going to need to connect some of these other affordability challenges with healthcare, which is not impossible. But to your point, the Medi-Cal cuts haven't actually been implemented yet. So it is a bit of a when this happens.
But rates have gone up.
Rates have gone up. And there's another piece of this, too, beyond just coverage. The hospitals are huge businesses in Visalia. If you go to the hospital, that's Tulare County's largest employer. And so Kauai Health. So they're looking at this, too, from a local economic perspective. Again, maybe that hasn't completely hit, but the warnings that when I was down there reporting heard from hospital executives was the Medicaid cuts are going to be a huge jobs hit in this area. So that's another piece of this.
And a big revenue hit, too.
100%. Guys, let's dig into these two Democrats battling it out here. First, we have State Assemblymember Jasmeet Bains versus college professor Randy Villegas. Let's start with Bains. Who is she, Maya? What are her politics?
Yeah, so Dr. Bains is an assembly member from Kern County. Her assembly district really is basically Kern County. She is running on this message of, hey, I've won this district before. I have a track record of being able to attract voters from both parties, independents. She famously upset then Speaker, I think, Anthony Rendon with a vote on an oil-related bill and lost a committee assignment due to
Kind
that.
of a badge of honor in a district like
Yeah,
that,
and she
right?
wears that with pride.
Yeah.
She's like, hey, I got kicked off my committee and I'm not afraid to stand up to my party. So and she's also really leaning into her background as a physician. She still sees patients in the clinic on weekends, or so she says. Not sure if that's exactly up to date now that she's campaigning, but she is still an active doctor and really trying to lean into this theme of healthcare is on the ballot. And David Valadao voted to cut your health care. Who better to represent you and to replace him than a doctor who serves those Medicaid patients?
Yeah.
And Guy, what about Randy Villegas? What's his message, and how is it different from Jasmeet Bains?
Well, it's a lot more progressive. He's a teacher and also a local school board member who's really running on kind of a progressive Bernie Sanders-like platform, supporting Medicare for all, supporting raising the minimum wage, and has gotten a lot of support from not only like local progressives, but really like national progressives that have kind of made this something of a proxy war between the similar fights that you see between Democrats on issues like single-payer health care, on more kitchen table issues. And I think has created kind of a messy fight for Democrats as you've started to see like millions and millions of dollars. There's more outside spending in this congressional race than any congressional race in California. A lot of that, it's because this has become a Democratic proxy war.
Yeah, but that's interesting because you just laid out really specific policy proposals. Bains is not doing that in this campaign, right? I mean, she's really not sitting for interviews. She declined one with you recently. She hasn't really outlined very specific policy platforms on her campaign website compared to Villegas, who's very specific about things like single payer. What do you make of that? Like, what do you think her politics would be in Congress?
I think that it's interesting that she is pretty much running her campaign as though she is an incumbent, trying to insulate yourself from potential, viral moments or opportunities to have a gaffe or something that could be damaging to your campaign. So, has declined to participate in debates and, only provides select interviews or statements when we go to her to ask questions for story. So
Really cautious.
yes,
Like.
yeah, she doesn't want. I mean, I think that if you would ask her or her campaign, they would say that they're very confident about their positioning in this race, and to jeopardize that is not a risk that I think any campaign strategist would want to take at this point. So when she goes to Washington, I guess I would expect to see more of what we've seen in the Assembly. And that is somebody who is kind of loud, boisterous on the issues that are important to her and doesn't really care what her party leadership wants her to do.
I'm curious, Guy, about climate change and environmental issues, which don't play particularly well in the Valley generally, and especially in a district where there's a lot of oil production. I know that Bernie Sanders has endorsed Villegas, and Jane Fonda's climate PAC has endorsed him. How is he talking about those issues, if at all?
That's a good question. I haven't interviewed him on those. I don't know if he said anything to you, Maya, on climate type issues.
I know. I mean, what I've
coming up?
seen,
Yeah.
is that he frames it more around like affordability.
Yes, very much this like sort of Zohran Mamdani as
Well, he has one of his
populist.
consultants, right?
Yeah. He brought on the video strategist who was behind a lot of Mamdani's viral videos in social media, and so I just to piggyback off of what you were saying about the progressive energy, I think he's also trying to lean into this idea of it's not left versus right, but it's top versus bottom. It's corporate moneyed interests versus you, everyday person, trying to afford your life. And your life is more expensive and harder because of elite insiders, people in power, and companies that are power hungry, money hungry, who don't have your interests at heart.
I mean, it's two totally different like theories of the case for getting Democrats and winning these swing seats. One is like the traditional path we've seen in the Central Valley, folks like Rudy Salas, Adam Gray, like be the Valleycrat who's bucked the party in Sacramento, who, by the way, Democrats, it frustrates them to no end, these people in Sacramento.
And then they endorse them when they run in
can't
this
wait for them
district.
to,
Yeah, totally.
help flip the House, versus someone like Villegas, who I think hopes to bring in maybe new voters, maybe like kind of increased turnout. There's another camp that's like, none of this matters. It's all about the national environment. You mentioned TJ Cox. Like, TJ Cox was the only Democrat to beat Valadao. Now he's about to be the ranking member on the level 2 yard. So, like, it's not necessarily the best candidate. We've had close contests with him versus others where you're like, is it really about candidate quality versus all the things that kind of drive House elections nationally?
Well, Maya, talk about how they're differentiating themselves. Like, Bains has made some pretty, I would say, extreme attacks on Villegas over his time as a school board trustee related to some, I think, decades-old sexual assault settlements that the district made. Why do you think she's doing that? And is that something that is working? It's a landing, or is it turning people off?
I think I would say that I would presume the Villegas campaign would say that the Bains campaign is going after them on, pretty extreme or sensational
kind of below the belt
because they feel threatened, or because the Villegas campaign is keeping up with them financially in terms of fundraising. Notably, Villegas has vowed to not take corporate PAC money and is still keeping Bains within eyesight fundraising-wise. I actually think that in some quarters he has out-fundraised her and has a little more cash on hand than she does. So definitely they would say that she's feeling threatened.
Well, and we've seen in some congressional races where, like in the ads that Marisa just mentioned, are being funded by a pro-Israel PAC, and I'm wondering,
Which is so relevant in the Central Valley.
Well, and that's
sure.
often,
Democratic
AIPAC,
majority for Israel, I believe, DMFI.
Yeah, and I know that in New Jersey they talked about immigration. As they don't talk about Israel, but I'm wondering, has like Villegas staked out like a more, I don't know, extreme or to the left position about funding for military aid to Israel, for example? I mean, why do they care about who wins this race?
Yeah, I think that one of his talking points is, I am not going to vote. I'm going to vote to not send any more of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars to a nation like Israel, who has, single-payer health care, who has some of these more progressive policies that the U.S. doesn't. And, kind of tying Israel to this affordability idea of, hey, we have problems here at home that our tax dollars can fix, and we shouldn't be sending that in the form of weapons and munitions to a nation like Israel that is committing genocide in Gaza. He does use the word genocide.
And she apparently did once, but has backtracked in that. I mean, it's just wild to me that
sort of unclear. Yeah,
okay, yeah.
She told Politico that she misunderstood a question, and it was
but
caught on video.
But it's wild that these issues are actually playing in a race like this. Well, let's talk about how this is playing within the bigger Democratic Party. We did see, I think, local and state Democratic groups either not endorse or split their endorsements. Maya, is that correct?
Yes, definitely. So a lot of the California power players and groups in Sacramento, like SEIU California, for instance, have lined up behind Jasmeet Bains. She also has Emily's List, and more recently, the Planned Parenthood Action Fund behind her.
Those are more progressive groups, interestingly, actually.
When it comes to California standards, yes. But also, they are somewhat of institutional figures. They have the ear of Governor Gavin Newsom. They have allies in the legislature, and in my opinion, definitely represent more of maybe an institutional or establishment base of support. Villegas, he is a teacher and an educator by training, and so he has the powerful California Teachers Association behind him. As Guy said, that he has some national progressive voices behind him, like Bernie Sanders, and others. And so
the state party did not endorse, right?
The state party did not endorse in this race, no. At convention, it was nobody had hit the threshold that they needed. I think it was like 60% or 65%. That
the DCCC did.
Yeah, the National Party.
The National Democrats
get into
weighed
that
in.
Guy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this was pretty recent. The Democratic congressional campaign arm got behind Jasmeet Bains in this race, and that stirred up a lot of controversy because I think that was a signal to Villegas supporters that there's the national parties kind of handpicking their candidate. We've actually seen this to a similar extent. Like the DCCC pretty early on got behind Rudy Salas in the last race, even though Melissa Hurtado, who was a sitting state senator, was running. It is somewhat uncommon to see, like, this is a fairly competitive race, to see them jump in and like pick one candidate. I think if you were to I think if I could guess like the national party's perspective on this, I think would feel like their ticket to getting Valadao out of here is on healthcare. And I wonder if there's concerns that if you have a candidate who's supporting single payer, if that muddies the argument and the waters around healthcare. If this simply does not become, let's get this guy out of here who voted to cut your healthcare, but now we're having this larger conversation about single payer and who ultimately funds that. And I think it's a question for Democrats. You're seeing this play out in the Michigan Senate primary. You're seeing it to some extent in the governor's race. Like, the single healthcare is such a good issue for Democrats. There is concern that if you bring in the element of single payer, and I know there's lots of positives to talk about single payer, could ultimately lower the overall cost of the system even, but could it politically muddy the waters of what seems to be a good issue for Democrats?
Well, we're seeing that play out in the governor's race here as well. As an aside, I met Randy Villegas in 2016 in Cleveland. I was covering
Cleveland?
Yes. I was covering the Republican convention. That's the year Trump got nominated for the first time. And he was a student journalist at the time, which speaks to how young he is. I mean, he's about 32, I think. Is there a generational change issue? I mean, neither Bains nor Valadao are that old. But, I mean, is he hoping that his youth might spark excitement or bring out voters, younger voters, students, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. I saw him last time I was down in Bakersfield at a forum on campus at Bakersfield College, and he was really making the appeal to young people of like, hey, we need somebody in Congress who understands how hard it is to buy a house, how hard it is to pay off your student debt, like, and really like trying to get these students involved with the campaign too, as volunteers, as interns.
Typically younger voters don't turn out in great numbers, so they need that extra incentive maybe.
Definitely.
I mean, this all gets, though, from, the way some of these issues are playing, the DCCC getting involved, and really angering some of the local Democratic Party activists who are not happy with that, right, Maya?
All of the county chairs in this district are behind Villegas and have had multiple press conferences denouncing the DCCC's involvement, saying that National Democrats are putting their thumb on the scale. And
it's like a flashback to 2016 here. Like,
oh, yeah.
But I mean, this is really fascinating because it gets to the heart of this debate within the party, which is like, is this an ideology problem for Democrats or is it something else? I was really struck by a New York Times Siena poll that actually found that a majority of the Democratic coalition is fine with where they're at on ideology. But they did have some kind of basic things. They felt like they should embrace economic populism, oppose aid to Israel, and find modest ways to shift toward the center on cultural issues. So what do you guys make of that? Because in some ways that feels like what Villegas is running on, right? And so it is interesting that, like, to Guy's point, the DCCC is making this bet that she's a better candidate, but we don't really know that.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. You guys, I think maybe last year, interviewed Valadao's longtime political consultant. And his theory was that Democrats had moved too far to the left culturally, and that's why Valadao was able to increase his gains in the district, why Trump was able to win that district. I think,
and some of those are like the Latino men we've heard about, but they might be open to say a populist message, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just that's not a settled case. I think there's a very strong argument to make that these gains have just as much to do with the state of the economy and the cost of living and how unaffordable things were under Joe Biden versus the cultural issues. I haven't seen granular enough data in the 22nd district to actually like sort that out, but clearly I think Democrats are hoping this is a cost of living thing that they can then now turn against the incumbent administration.
I know that anecdotal evidence is our favorite kind, but every person that I talk to on the streets of this district, number one thing, so expensive to live these days. Grocery prices, gas prices, housing costs.
Well, we've talked about oil as a big industry in this district, but agriculture is obviously huge. And among the groups hit hardest by the tariffs that President Trump imposed were farmers, egg companies,
not to mention food prices for
all
of us.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Are we hearing that at all? That link between? I mean, Trump's not on the ballot, but Valadao is a Republican. I mean, I'm sure Democrats will try to exploit that, but are you hearing that at all from voters?
I haven't quite heard the direct link between the high cost of living, cost of business, and Republicans specifically, but I do think there's an opportunity there for, if the Democrats can get a clear, simple message through to connect those two data points, then definitely people are animated about how expensive life is. But I haven't seen them successfully make that
I mean,
connection
they haven't
yet.
really started making the case
I
against
think that's
Valadao yet.
We'll have to see that in the fall. And also Central Valley, you're not just talking about like the mom and pop farmer, right? These are like large businesses. I would say that would be something interesting to watch in like the ads that play out this fall, and kind of how Democrats, which lanes they choose to go after Valadao with their candidate. Interestingly, though, the Republican Party and Valadao, his campaign, are already starting to put out messages to Democratic voters in hopes of covertly boosting Villegas.
Mm-hmm.
They're sending out.
They think Bains is a harder candidate to beat.
I guess that would be the theory behind this. They're sending out messages to Democratic voters in the district saying, Randy Villegas, he's been endorsed by AOC. He's too extreme. Please vote Valadao. The underlying reason behind the message is getting Villegas' name out there in the association with AOC.
Yeah.
That's a strategy used across the country.
Yeah. By Democrats, Republicans, everyone will play dirty. if
including
they
here
need
in
to.
California,
Yes,
in the governor's
for
race.
sure.
Yeah.
So, Maya, do we have any polling? It's hard to poll in these smaller districts. There's not usually the money. I mean, this is like, the campaigns have, I think, together raised around $1.5 million compared to like $17 million in one of the Orange County races. So do we have any numbers?
Right. I mean, first of all, it's way cheaper to buy an ad in the Bakersfield market than it is in Orange County. I believe the one publicly released poll that I saw was funded by the Villegas campaign, showed him out polling Bains, which
Which
you
is why
have
we
an
don't
internal
usually
poll
report
that
on
is
internal
showing
polls. Which is why they
your
released
head.
it.
Yeah, which is why they released it. If you have a good poll that you did internally shows you winning, like of course you want to share that. I guess it's notable then that the Bains campaign has not done the same. I haven't seen an internal poll released from them that show her way ahead.
All right.
But
we'll leave it there. We'll be watching on Tuesday. Maya C. Miller of CalMatters and Guy Marzorati of KQED. Thank you both.
Thanks,
guys.
That's going to be a wrap for Thursday, May 28th. Political Breakdown's a production of KQED.
Our engineer today is Christopher Beal. Our producer is Izzy Bloom. Our video team includes Alex Tran, Hazel Tesoro, Matt Morales, Jalar Zeta, and Vivian Morales. I'm Scott Shafer.
And I'm Marisa Lagos. Have a good one.